What is the best possible hatch we could get in crazy hard? I don't know if it actually does. I've never tested it that much. You know, like, oh, that's a scoop? You know, out of all those eggs, there's some specks. And you can see those eggs still coming down. They're still floating on top, which is real nice. Lots of brine shrimp. Quite a bit of brine going on in there. Get in there. All right, so today we're gonna talk about hatching brine shrimp. This is something I've been doing for 10 plus years. You know, Dean's been doing it for 40 years. I only got 10 years, so I've learned a thing or two. And when you're working with newer products and you're testing out eggs and doing all that, you learn a lot about what works for your water. And a lot of this, we're gonna talk about setup and how to harvest and all of that. But a lot of this is like cooking or baking. You can have the recipe, but there's still that element that you gotta know when to flip it, you gotta know when to take it out of the oven, and that's kind of what brine shrimp is, because we all have different water, and it's a little bit different, but these are gonna be the best practices. So I highly recommend using the Ziss Hatchery. We saw it on the website. We've also got the San Francisco Bay. We've got older videos that show that. This just gets a better hatch due to the cone shape and crazy hard. It's not gonna break on you, not gonna fall over, that kind of stuff. So the initial thing to put it together, all right? Now there's lots of little tips, like you can hang this on an aquarium. There's a lot of little stuff we'll cover in other videos, but today we just wanna focus on a good hatch. When you put this together, you need a rigid piece of tubing that it comes with and a piece of Aquarium Co-Op airline tubing. If it's any other brand, it doesn't taste as good. So it's gotta be Aquarium Co-Op branded airline tubing. And you just put a little connector piece on there so that you have this flexibility. This is important. If you put the piece that comes with it straight on there, it's gonna be very rigid. It won't go where you need it to. So when you put this in, it needs to set right at the bottom of this. Now, you can see a little bit of cloudiness in here. That's because I didn't wash it down too much, because I just minimally rinse it and I hatch brine shrimp all the time. Doesn't matter. That's why you see this being a little bit cloudy. If I cleaned it well, you would notice that. But when the salt settles down here and we start bubbling, you want it to mix all the salt into the water for you, keep all the eggs suspended. That's how that works. Then you have something like this when it's actually running. So we're gonna talk about how I set this up. This, I have light on it. I've got the bubbling going on, and it connects to a little USB air pump. I've got a little extra long one. I'll show you why. We're gonna set up another batch right now. So first things first, you fill it with water. You don't use a dechlorinator. You just use tap water. The chlorine actually helps break down the eggs. And you fill it to about there-ish. You can go a little bit higher, a little bit lower. If you go to this line, you're gonna get eggs up on the lid, and that's just more cleaning. I don't like to clean, so turn the water off and waste some water here while I'm trying to film. Now we built a special hanger here, and there's a different video you're gonna see where we build a hanger for one that's made out of PVC and super easy, and not the one you've seen other YouTubers do. This is actually from our forum. Someone posted it and I thought it was genius, so I'm gonna build one. But I hatch a lot of brine shrimp. This is the same setup where I use at the store. And so now, to get this ready, we've got the water, kind of room temp. This being in my fish room is always at 78 degrees coming out of this faucet. But the temperature you want to hatch at is somewhere between 74 and 82, anywhere in there roughly. A lot of people might use a heater. We heat the whole space here, or maybe it's in your house and it's warm enough. Or my tip, how we used it back in my day, before we all had fish rooms that we heated, what we actually did is you used a light source. So this is an LED, it doesn't get very hot at all. We used to use actual light bulbs. And when you have an old incandescent light bulb and it's 100 watts, guess what? That's like a 100-watt heater. You just put it near the eggs and the heat will transfer into it. Now, this light is gonna be very important when we go to harvest, and there's some, I would say mostly wives' tale, that the light actually helps it hatch. I don't know if it actually does. I've never tested it that much, but I do need it to harvest every time, and I needed the heat for many years, so that's why most of us did it. So we're gonna leave that back down there like that. We'll get to that point later. We're still setting up here, so we got our room temp water. Now, you're gonna need some salt. You can use a wide variety of salts, almost any salt, but I'm gonna talk about some. So something like aquarium salt, just normal salt with no additives, that'll get you the saltiness you need. Here, now we're getting to that recipe, my water is not very hard, there's no minerals in it, and it's very low pH. That kind of eats away at the shells and is not good for these brine shrimp, right? So I have to buffer that up. I end up using salt for a saltwater aquarium. This salt has calcium, magnesium, lots of other trace elements. It has buffer, so the pH is going to go higher. No matter what salt you're using, you're going to use 1 tablespoon per 1 liter. Now the Ziss brine shrimp hatchery, what we're talking about, is 2 liters. So 2 tablespoons. Now, a trick that I've got, get yourself a coffee spoon. So when you put coffee, I don't drink coffee, but I had to figure this out. A coffee spoon to put grounds in when you're gonna make coffee, it's always 2 tablespoons. So go find yourself a plastic one. If you get a stainless steel one, and it's not too awesome like I did on Amazon, it'll rust with all the salt. So you end up with little bits of rust in there. Doesn't hurt anything though, so don't worry about it, but get yourself a plastic one so you don't have Corey's problem. Now, all I have to do is fill this up with water. Because it's 2 tablespoons, it's 1 scoop, right? So I grab a scoop, and you can be pretty liberal or not. You can go with, you know, like, oh, that's a scoop, or that's a scoop. Either way, you're gonna get the hatch. Brine shrimp are crazy hardy. They go with really high salinity, pretty low salinity, really hot temperatures, not that hot temperatures. They're forgiving. So, but what you do want a bit of consistency. So that way, you know, if I go, okay, this time it took me 24 hours to get a good hatch, you don't want to take 36 one time and 18 another. You want it to be like, oh, every day I'm getting my good hatch. And so 24 hours is roughly what I shoot for. If it's really hot in the fish room, maybe it's only 18. Maybe it's 36 if it's really cold. So that's why you want that 74 to 82 temperature, somewhere where you can basically put those eggs in today and tomorrow you'll be able to harvest. Keeping eggs preserved, I use this little mini fridge I got on Amazon. It's kind of awesome and kind of a total waste of time too. So it's got bragging rights of like I've got a brine shrimp fridge, but other than that, so originally we were testing the eggs in here and I hid them in an extreme thing, and then now here's our eggs the way they come. And what you're trying to do is keep them out of moisture, keep them out of oxygen, and keep them out of heat, because that's what we do here. We put oxygen, water, and heat, and they hatch. So we gotta not have those. If that went on in here, they would hatch. If I put salt water in here and bubbled it, they would hatch. That'd be bad for us. So we open this up, and now you're gonna hatch some amount. I hatch a lot, so sometimes I run more than one of these at a time. Like Dean always running 2 at the store, we'll run 2 or 3. Here I run 2-ish, 1 to 2, depending on how many fry I've got going. So you'll probably become like us, and you're gonna start collecting scoops. Like this one's used for meds, but it's like, oh, look at that little baby scoop. Or you go and do what my wife hates, and you go steal her measuring spoons. I hatch a whole tablespoon in here, which is a lot of eggs. Most people are gonna do a teaspoon, maybe a half a teaspoon, maybe only have 2 aquariums. They're gonna do like 1/8 of a teaspoon. I happen to hatch a lot because I got a lot of fish. And so all you do, you grab a scoop and you dump it in. So now my eggs are in there. I close this back up. Now, you're gonna ask, can you let that sit on your counter? What if I don't wanna put it in the fridge? You can, but if this takes you, let's say this pack might take me 2 or 3 weeks to use up. If it takes you 2 or 3 months or 2 or 3 years, over time, because we're opening the bag, taking some out, putting it in, moist air from your fish room is gonna get in there and the hatch rate's gonna go down slightly. So we officially label these as 90% eggs, 90% hatching eggs, but they're actually 95%, and maybe after 2 years you're like, oh, I'm only getting 75%. We're doing testing to see if we can measure how far they go down, but if you're worried about it, keep it in the fridge. You can also keep it in the can, which I don't have the can on me right now, so I'm bad. Let me go grab the can so you actually know what we're talking about. In here, we have conveniently placed eggs that I went and found that were in my studio. But this is how you actually buy the eggs from us. They come in a metal container with like quadruple seal. So you get this first one, you get the second one that's like a paint can, then you get the sealed up eggs inside of it. There's actually another seal here that you would normally rip off, but I already ripped this one off for testing. So you get all of that. It's meant so that you can pour the eggs, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to get the eggs out of this every time. I've had my hand be wet sometimes, and that's not good. So you're meant to pour the eggs in here, and then you can get a nice easy scoop out of there and keep refilling. But now you know what you're looking for on the website. And recycle these when you're done with them, please. That's why we did metal, so they can be recycled really easy and be used for fish foods and stuff too. You can definitely put fish food in there and feed it out. I'll show people how I end up using it, but then when you're done, you throw them in the fridge or freezer. Get in there. All right, back to hatching. So we have got no air going. We're gonna do one of two things here. We're gonna start harvesting these ones that are ready to go. So I need to take the air out of it. So being that I have a dual system, what I do is I grab this out, and you can see we've got a lot of condensation, maybe a little bit of hatched eggs on the top, and we'd have some on the downspout here. I just give it a quick rinse. So we don't want to foul the new hatch that we're doing. All right, so quick little rinse. And then, being that I'm connected to my USB air pump with the extra long line, I just plug it right into the next one. And what you're gonna see is, while we're waiting for this to settle down, this is gonna get going, and all the salt's gonna dissolve. You can see it's piled up on the bottom there, and the eggs are kind of clumped together, but they will stop doing that fairly soon. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm gonna remove this light because this is gonna make it so they don't converge. We need a light source so that the brine shrimp that are alive are attracted to it. Right now, we're kind of illuminating this whole thing, so they're not gonna get as concentrated as we want. So I move this, and I put this right down here. And this is just a bendy LED light that I got off of Amazon. At some point in the future, if you're watching this and it's been a year or more or 6 months or more, we probably sell a light now, because I've been testing a bunch of different lights. I kind of like this one. It's got some different options that we don't need. It doesn't use a lot of electricity, but I want to make sure that it does what we want it to do. So now what you want to do is don't forget about your hatch. It's so easy, because this is going to take like 5 or more minutes to settle out. Now, it's real easy to be like, let me go see what's going on in the Aquarium Co-Op forum or the YouTube channel. And pretty soon it's been 2 hours and all your brine shrimp have died because they ran out of oxygen. So you kind of just gotta, what I do is I typically go and pre-feed all the big fish, all that kind of stuff. Any maintenance you gotta do, scrape a little algae so that you're kind of in eye shot of this. Now, what we're looking for here, we want all the brine shrimp, or majority of it, to come to the bottom, and all the hatched eggs. So they hatched out and the shells are floating on the top. This is the difference between ours and other companies' eggs, basically. You see right here? So you see all those eggs up top. Those have hatched out, or some of the unhatched. And you see how it's fairly light, and then towards the bottom, much more dense orange. That's because they're being drawn to the light down there. Now, with lesser quality eggs, cheaper brands, less hatch rate, that kind of stuff, usually what you're gonna get is down at the bottom, you're gonna get a slurry of live brine shrimp and eggs that didn't hatch. We have some, but it is very few. If you look, you're gonna see some specks. You'll see them. You know, out of all those eggs, there's some specks. Now, I hatched a whole tablespoon of brine shrimp, so they really can't get all the way to the bottom, but if you only had 1/8 of a teaspoon, they'd all be right down here for you to harvest. We're now going to harvest, and I'm going to show you that. So I end up using all of this water because there's so many brine shrimp. I will say you can technically use as much as 2 tablespoons of eggs in there. Now, that is an insane amount of brine shrimp, and you have to be really, really dialed in, because every time they hatch out, they go to the bathroom, they're fouling that water. So what happens is, if I put 2 tablespoons of eggs in there, and now it's tomorrow, at about 20 hours, I should be harvesting. At 24, that's the limit. At 30, they'll all have suffocated and died because the waste got too much. So you're riding a fine line. It's much easier if you need that many eggs to just run 2 brine shrimp hatchers. Then you could go 24, 30, 36 hours. It doesn't really matter. You're not under the gun, so to speak. So then I just grab a clear container. I happen to use these like 1-gallon jugs, but you can use sometimes I use an easy fry bottle type of thing so I can squirt it into tanks. Doesn't matter what you use, I just like to be able to see into it. So I've got it set up by my sink. All I have to do is set it up, and this bottom part, the valve, this is where you harvest the brine shrimp. So now we go, oh, let me open this up for the camera. There we go. Now we have liquid gold just pouring out. And that's going to take probably 2 or 3 minutes to get all of the water out of that. We can actually light it up down here now. So again, don't walk away too far, because I've done that. You want to be feeding fish right now and doing things, because if you drain all these eggs that hatched out, you got to do this whole process again, and it's going to be a real pain in the butt, and you're going to be sad. So stay within earshot and listen. It'll slow down as it gets towards the end. Lots of brine. You see very few eggs in there. Not, no hatch is ever going to be free of eggs, but this is less than 1% would be unhatched eggs in what I'm going to feed. Where I've had some really kind of, for lack of a better term, eBay eggs or something like that. It's kind of no-name eggs where maybe 20% or more is just unhatched eggs, and that what happens is it technically could bind up a little baby fish or something, and you might get some more deaths. I actually haven't really seen it be a problem. Dean says he's noticed it a lot with things like rams and other very, very tiny fry. I don't deal in that often, so for guppies and all that, I haven't noticed a whole big of a problem, but it is lame to know that 20% of your eggs aren't hatching, so already it's like costs you 20% more, and you've got 20% more waterfowling and all of that. So we focused on what is the best possible hatch we could get. Let's make it as easy as possible for every hobbyist and take out the guesswork. And it really, we wanted to make it simple. So if you get the 2 tablespoon scoop, it's 1 tablespoon or 1 scoop of salt, 1 scoop of eggs, and the 1 filled up container of water. So it's 1, 1, and 1 gets you a great hatch. So that's, if you can remember, I do 1 scoop of this, I do 1 scoop of this, it was filled with water, I come back tomorrow in 1 day, and it works. So now we're just gonna wait for that to you can see, you get a little bit better of a picture now of all the live brine shrimp kind of buzzing around in there. That's what the fish are gonna go nuts for now that it's not as dense. And you can see those eggs still coming down, they're still floating on top, which is real nice.
So this is not hatched and hatched. I mean,
it would be not hatched and hatched technically, but usually, right? Yeah, there's not a huge difference, but a lot of times low quality eggs will sink. And yes, so technically what you could do, you could remove all the brine shrimp and strain it with a brine shrimp strainer, which I don't do, but I'll show you that process. And then you could make new salt water and use these eggs again, and you might get like 5% more to hatch. But you're doing 100% more work for 5% more brine shrimp. Basically everyone just goes, I would just set up new and put another scoop of brine shrimp in. That's what you do. And so it's much better to do it that way than to have eggs that are like, oh, half of them aren't hatching. That's a real pain. So we got to keep an eye because we're getting close. We're getting close to getting way too many eggs coming down through there. So I start slowing it down at this point because it's real sad times when you get. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just shut it off here, and I'll even waste that little bit of brine. You can see for the water, there's not even that many left in that water because they're not as condensed. They're all down here now. They were pulled to the bottom with the light, then we harvested them. So now I've got this container of brine shrimp. Here it is. We'll put it in some better light. I'll show you the next trick.
Is that the same amount that you just made?
Yes, it's the exact same thing. So what you saw me set up is exactly what we just harvested here. So the next trick, I recommend this turkey baster. Now this turkey baster is very important. It is a no drip turkey baster because I'm going to tell you right now, your family is going to hate you when you drip brine shrimp on the carpet, on the floor, and what does that smell? That's rotting brine shrimp. So instead, use a no drip one, and I just grab a big old container of it, or not container, but siphon full of it. And you notice how, there we go, it's going to stop dripping any second.
1 eternity later.
There we go. So the stuff off the outside will drip, but when you start going to feed multiple tanks, what I do is I just kind of squirt. So now you're going to want to see that in an aquarium, obviously, because you don't see what the brine shrimp are doing, and that's the important part. So I'm going to grab some more. So I just walk around like this with my brine shrimp in hand. I'll put it in here with these big fish, because a lot of people go, well, big fish don't eat it. Well, I got news for you. All fish love brine shrimp. So I just put a whole squirt in there, and when I back up and they get used to Jimmy having a camera in their face, they're going to come eat them. And here they come. They're going, oh, well, I don't mind if I do. I'll eat that. So the best part is, this is how you really spawn fish, because sometimes you'll have fry that you don't know about, and they're now going to raise up that you weren't, this isn't a big meal for them, but this is a sign that baby food is around. Maybe it's time to have some babies. And so a lot of times I'll do this to help trigger them spawn. And with like these yellow labs, this little tidbit, if you look in the back corner, they dug a pit. They're ready to breed. They're a mouth brooder. But yeah, so I try to make it real quick and easy. And we just go through all the tanks. And I see it there. I'll show you here with these live bears and this goldfish. And you don't have to put a whole squirt in. You can go, oh, there's not that many fish in there. That's all they're getting. Everyone loves it. Where you'll really see things go nuts, babies and like these Rummy-nosed tetras. And I really will spoil some fish. Like when these come in and they just got through quarantine and they're starving, I'll literally just pour it in. So it's a lot of brine shrimp. Now, what you just watched was me pouring all the salt water and everything too, and you're going, wait, but that's fresh water. This also has a bunch of ammonia, and I would say, yes, both of those. Luckily for me, I use live plants, and so live plants are gonna consume any of the ammonia that would have been in here, and they're gonna love all of that calcium and magnesium and all the other elements that are in there. So, that's what I do. Now, if you wanted to harvest, let's say you say, oh, I wanna do the Dean method, and I don't want that to go into my tanks. Well, then what you have to do is you grab one of these things. And we don't sell these things yet because I'm not fully on board with them yet. That's why. I want to make my own. I want to make it good. This one's not perfect. This is one of the Ziss ones. You can find them online. They're not my favorite yet. But what you do is you would drain it straight into, well, I'll just do it. So now I'll move this over a little bit. You would drain this straight into here. It's going to let the salt water drain through and keep your brine shrimp. You see how the brine shrimp's collecting in the sieve? And now you're gonna have this, you know, brine shrimp without the salt. Now let's pretend I harvested all of that for sake of time. Then what you do is you rinse it real quick. And you go, let's get all the salt, because I'm freaked out about the salt. You'd have more in here, obviously. All right, so now you've got this, and you would then pour it back into that, maybe that bucket I was using or something like that. But now we'll just feed the other Rummy-nosed tetras, and you'll see what it's like, you know, without the salt going in. And just like that. So that's how you would harvest it without getting any of the salt in there. I personally find the salt from marine salt to be beneficial. I also put the salt in even when I was doing, even when I did normal aquarium salt. I don't really care because I do water changes, the aquarium consumes it, all of that. I never got into a problem. Typically when I'm raising babies, I'm changing a lot of water anyway. So then we'll finish this whole process here. So imagine you fed out all your brine shrimp and you're ready to set it up for the next day. You saw how we set it up originally. Now we just have to rinse it. So you pull it out. Uh-oh. So you've got you got the tiniest bit of eggs down there, or of hatch brine, but now you just have this slurry. Don't let this sit. You'll come back tomorrow and you wonder what seafood place died in your fish room. It's this. It smells terrible. So just give it a quick rinse, dump it out. And this is why I love this thing. The lesser kits are a pain to clean. You gotta get your hand in there, you're cutting it a little bit because you're using a cut-off pop bottle or some other apparatus, and you just get in there real quick. Don't forget to clean your nozzle. I just turn it open a little bit, make sure all the brine shrimp's out, not trapped. Now if you want to be proactive, you can also you could set it up, let the salt dissolve for the next day already. So you could let this sit. You could go, hey, I'm gonna get ready for tomorrow. Get your salt ready, don't put the eggs in there, just put your salt, and you would let it bubble. I only have one set up at the moment because I used another one for another project, but then you'd be set up for tomorrow and good to go. You'd harvest this one, then you switch back, harvest the other one. Harvest, 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 happy fish, lots of spawning, and you're good to go. Now, if you're having any problems, reach out on the forum or something like that, tweak it a little bit. Maybe you have crazy hard water. Maybe you shouldn't be using marine salt. Just use aquarium salt. Maybe you should hatch more eggs, less eggs. Maybe the temperature's going on. It's a recipe. And someone might like a little bit more sugar, a few more chocolate chips. You know, you gotta dial it into taste. Now, I haven't tasted it, but Dean has, and he says it tastes terrible, so don't eat it. The brine shrimp hatchery makes it super easy. Our eggs make it even easier. Pair it with decent recipe and you're good to go. Easy peasy.